There were brass spittoons on the floor, and across the station a glint of light caught my eye. A man was pulling a gold watch from his vest pocket. Now, the author, the narrator, he was describing what he saw on the station. First, he saw those lamps with flickering lights, and then there were brass spittoons. Spittoons are vessels in which you spit, which are meant for spitting on the floor. And he found those brass spittoons, brass vessels meant for spitting. And across the station, a glint of light caught my eye. And across the station, he saw a reflection of light. A man was pulling a gold watch from his vest pocket. He saw a man taking out a gold watch from his vest pocket, from his pocket. These watches were generally attached with chains, which were used in olden times. He snapped open the cover, glanced at his watch, and frowned. He opened the watch, which had a cover on it, looked at his watch, and he frowned. Frown is to bring creases on your forehead. He wore a derby hat, a black four-button suit with tiny lapels. Now, he was wearing a dress, a coat with four buttons, and with tiny lapels. Lapels are the part of the coat front which is folded back. The front collars which are folded back. And he had a big black handlebar mustache. His mustaches were like handlebar, bent at the side, like the handle of the bike. Then I looked around and saw that everyone in the station was dressed like 1890 something. Like people would be dressed in the 1890. That is, he was in the 20th century, but this time in which he had reached was long back. I never saw so many beards, sideburns, and fancy mustaches in my life. Now, all the people there, many of them were wearing very different types of beards and sideburns. Sideburns are hair growing down the face at the side of the ears on men, and they had sideburns and fancy mustaches. A woman walked in through the train gate. She wore a dress with leg of mutton sleeves and skirts to the top of her high buttoned shoes. So now a woman came there. She wore a dress with leg of mutton sleeves. That is, the sleeves were properly tight and then very loose near her shoulders. If you see some old pictures of Britishers and Europeans, you will find ladies wearing gowns, wearing long dresses with such sleeves, which are tight in the beginning at the near the hands, and they become quite balloon like near the shoulder, loose, and her skirt was also to the top of her high buttoned shoes. Back of her, out on the tracks, I caught a glimpse of a locomotive, a very small Currier and Ives locomotive. Then he saw a locomotive is an engine. He saw an engine which was of very olden times. Currier and Ives locomotive. This was the name of the locomotive, the manufacturer probably, with a funnel shaped stack. It had a funnel shaped stack through which the steam came out. These were steam engines. And then I knew. To make sure, I walked over to a newsboy and glanced at the stack of papers. Then he realized that he had reached somewhere back in time. and he casually walked near a boy who was selling newspapers at his feet. He had a pile of newspapers at his feet. It was The World, and The World hasn't been published for years. The newspaper was, the name of the newspaper was The World, and he knew that The World was printed long back. It had stopped being published for many years. The lead story said something about President Cleveland. I found that front page since in the public library files, and it was printed June 11th, 1894. So he had gone back in time, and the time he wanted to check the time, and he saw the newspaper on which it was written June 11th, 1894. I turned towards the ticket windows, knowing that here on the third level at Grand Central I could buy tickets that would take Louisa and me anywhere in the United States we wanted to go in the year 1894. And I wanted 2 tickets to Galesburg, Illinois. So he thought of buying 2 tickets, one for his wife and one for himself, and he knew that from here they could travel anywhere in the United States, like it was possible in 1894, because he had gone back into time, and he wanted 2 tickets to Galesburg, Illinois. Have you ever been there? It's a wonderful town still, with big old frame houses, huge lawns, and tremendous trees whose branches meet overhead and roof the streets. Roof the streets means they form a canopy. When trees are on both sides and they are getting entangled, the branches are getting entangled, so they make a roof of the branches, so they form a type of canopy. And he says that the town was wonderful, and the houses were big, they had huge lawns, and tremendous trees, huge trees were there. The branches were meeting overhead, forming a roof over the street. And in 1894, summer evenings were twice as long. The summer evenings were very long, the sun set quite late, and people sat out on their lawns, the men smoking cigars and talking quietly, the women waving palm leaf fans with the fireflies all around. Now, he says that in Galesburg, in summers, the evenings are very long and people are at leisure. The men are generally sitting in the lawn and they are talking quietly with their friends, and the women, they are fanning with palm leaves. And in 1894, summer evenings were twice as long and people sat out on their lawns, the men smoking cigars and talking quietly, the women waving palm leaf fans with the fireflies all around. Fireflies are insects which have a spark under them. So that is why they are called fireflies. At night you can see as if a spark is moving around here and there. It is actually a fly which has a spark under it. In a peaceful world, the world was quite peaceful. There were no wars, there was no stress, there were no troubles, no insecurity. The time was quite peaceful. To be back there with the First World War still 20 years off and World War II over 40 years in the future, I wanted 2 tickets for that. Now going back into a time when the World War had not happened, because World War must have brought lots of troubles, the after effects, and now he was in a time when 2 world wars had already been fought. So the problems and troubles and insecurities must have multiplied. He wanted to go into a time where the world wars had not happened. They were much far away, 20 years away the First World War was, and Second World War was 40 years ahead. The clerk figured the fare. He glanced at my fancy hat band, but he figured the fare, and I had enough for 2 coach tickets one way. But when I counted out the money and looked up, the clerk was staring at me. Now he went to a clerk and he asked for 2 tickets to Galesburg. The clerk, he looked at his fancy hat band, and then, but still, he calculated the fare, calculated the money he'll have to give for 2 tickets. And I had enough for 2 coach tickets. He had enough money to buy tickets for one side, 2 tickets. But when I counted out the money and looked up, the clerk was staring at me. When he counted the money and he tried to give the money to the clerk was looking at the money. He was staring at him. He nodded at the bills. He moved his head, looking at the rupees, at the money. He nodded. He moved his head. "That ain't money, mister," he said. He said, "This is not money, mister. And if you are trying to skin me, you won't get very far." So he said, if you are trying to cheat me, you won't get very far. You won't succeed. And he glanced at the cash drawer beside him. Of course, the money was old-style bills, half again as big as the money we use nowadays, and different looking. So the currency had changed during that time in 18th century, in 19th century, that is 1894. The money that was used, the currency that was used was different. It was quite big, half again as big as the money we use nowadays. They were big and they looked different. I turned away and got out fast. Now, the narrator, he quickly turned and left that place. There's nothing nice about jail even in 1894. Now, he has described the city and the evenings and the houses and all that beautiful things he has described. He said that is, the place was very nice, the time was very nice, everything. But the jail was not nice even during those times. That is why he did not want to go to prison for having different currency. So he immediately turned and left that place. And that was that. I left the same way I came, I suppose. He quickly went by the same way he had gone there. Next day during lunch hour, I drew $300 out of the bank, nearly all we had, and bought old style currency. That really worried my psychiatrist friend. Now he took out money from his bank and he purchased the old currency. You can buy old money at almost any coin dealers, but you have to pay a premium. You have to pay some money, some extra money, and you can buy as much old currency you want from the coin collectors. My $300 bought less than 200 in old style bills. Now his $300, with his $300 he could buy only 200 old